Hello to you today. Today is February 11th. It's a Sunday. It's actually Super Bowl Sunday, but that's not happening for a few more hours, so I got plenty of time to get some of these in here. I believe I have a treat for you. I'm just gonna throw it up here for a minute, okay? This is The Magpie Coffin by Wile E. Young. It's by Death's Head Press, also Dead Sky Publishing. But the most important part of it is this bottom word section right here where it says, a splatter western. If you've never heard of these stories before, it is my privilege to introduce them to you. Okay? The splatter western. The best I can say about these, and there's at least 14 published to date, is it's a subgenre of Western horror, which is something you don't hear about too often, but it exists. Okay, so for books like splatter westerns, you take your western and you gotta add a little supernatural into it. You know, it could be Indian magic, it could be deals with the devil, demons. Hell, you could probably throw some Cthulhu level stuff in there if you wanted to. But that's what happens in these stories. And because we call it splatter, this is where your knowledge from Dexter comes into play. It's all about blood splatter. You know, if two people are shooting each other out and someone gets hit, you're going to see 3 fingers get hit off. You're going to see a jaw come off, you know, or they'll be very visceral where it hits him in the head and it explodes out the back, and then he walks up and talks about what he sees there too. I didn't know these things existed, and I'm still trying to find out if it's going to be like, you know, what I really need in life, but for the most part, I've read a few of these, and as I finish one, I buy the next one. From what I've heard, is for the most part, all these stories are independent of each other. You know, if there's 14 books out there, there's a slight possibility that like one of them is a sequel to another. But I don't know if it's a direct sequel, like he's making a trilogy, and this is book 1, book 2, book 3. It might be along the lines of like James Bond, where yeah, he's got 26 sequels, but they're pretty independent from one another. A lot of what happens in a prior James Bond movie doesn't really get referenced in the newer ones, you know, except for the obvious things like the Jaws villain. He was in 2 movies. So, yeah, there's a history, and then boom, it's back. But for the most part, James Bond just does James Bond stuff. And anyone can practically watch any movie at any time. Now, how did I even come upon this? I totally and completely blindly stumbled over these. I was on eBay one day, and I was kind of looking for some merchandise out there for Marvel UK's Death's Head, the original Death's Head. You know, some of the graphic novels or maybe a figure or two, but I like to look every now and again to see if anything has a reasonable price to it. And for some reason, this popped up in the search. I'm like, well, the guy's selling books. He's selling all 14 books. And I was like, I love books. Let me see what these books are about. And I checked it out. And the reason why it popped up is because it is Death's Head Press. So if I'm looking for Death's Head, it's popping in right there. Because I'm trying to go for all departments to maximize my search. So, being the honest gentleman I am, I was like, I like these books. I see what they're at. I do a little mental math and say, okay, you know something? I'm going to bid like $200 for these and hopefully get all 14. Okay? That's about $14 a book. And you know, I of course waited for like the last 10 seconds, and I tried to snipe in that bid at the last, 10 seconds, and it worked. I actually got in there, and I was the high bidder. Problem was, I probably should have waited till 4 seconds left, because whoever I trumped, they came over the top and got me. So they got me with, 5-6 seconds left, and I wasn't thinking it was going to happen the way it did. So they beat me down. I gotta walk away saying, oh well, better luck next time. So I've been picking them up one by one. Let me now tell you about this story. Okay, the Magpie Coffin. To start out, it kind of gets right into the point of it and the action pretty quick. You're introduced to the really bad man. The outlaw, the vigilante you like kind of bad man. And, he's your anti-hero, whatever you want to call it, the killer vigilante, but he's got a reason. But you get into it and say, hey, this is the character I'm going to be following. You're into it. Boom. Go around the story. And they do well by showing you that he's a bad person in a few back-to-back reputational scenes. So you know that, not only do they have the reputation, but they can act upon it if necessary. Like, give me information. No. You know who I am? Oh, shit. Yeah, give me the information. And the fact that it was very speedy to get into it was very important, too, because if you look at the novel itself, you're looking at about 200 pages in this one. So you really can't waste too much real estate on so much of the motivation and so much of the backstory. You got to get into it and boom, you're off to the races. This one here, the Magpie Coffin, is basically a revenge plot. Okay, we've seen him before. We all like him. My favorite is actually the Park Chan-wook trilogy of movies. He had a lot of revenge in some of his stories. And the three that he has out as a trilogy, but again, not related trilogy, were Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, and Lady Vengeance. Okay. Revenge stories, all. One of the things in this, sorry, I had a brain fart there for a second. This one lays out the pacing of the story pretty well. Like I said, it immediately within page like 12 or 14, it's like talking about, oh, I found out that my Indian shaman master is dead, and I know these 4 men killed him. So it's a mentor revenge plot, and he has to go after them, and hopefully he can go after and kill all 4 of these guys. And I gotta quote this a little bit, but it's like, before the soul of his master leaves his body, even though the body's dead, it kind of sticks around. It leaves his body and then goes on to the other place, the next place, the great spiritual teepee in the netherworld. My words, by the way. They take their time with the first of the 4 that he has to go after, but I'll tell you what, man, oh man, it's a hell of a story arc. And this is where the splatter and the torture and the mystic all get to converge together and be front and center to tell you the story that they're trying to tell you in the genre they're telling you. Okay? And by the way, I might not have mentioned it before, but I believe the Magpie Coffin was the first one from this imprint that came out. So this is almost like setting the tone for what's going to happen in the future, and I think they did a damn good job in picking this one to be number 1. Okay. But he goes after the first guy, who's also himself kind of a torturer kind of person, so it gets into it. In a way, you could almost say, oh, fun stuff. But only fun stuff if you kind of liked watching movies like Hostel. Then you're into the fun. Otherwise, it's just torture and could be gory and what have you. Now, and then it goes on. I mean, obviously, it's going to take you through all 4 people. So he kind of goes boom, 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 boom. And you see as the story progresses, how he's got to, take trips like into the spirit world. He keeps asking the dead body of the mentor for assistance because he's carrying it with him, like in a coffin that he's chained up to make sure the guy doesn't get out. And he's got even a traveling companion that keeps hearing thumping. Not sure what the hell it is. Thinks it might be like rats inside the coffin, but they try to let you know there's mystic going on here. But it goes through the journey. There's mystical, there's visceral, and it goes from the beginning to the end. So it is a page turner. That is the Magpie Coffin in a quick nutshell, non-spoiler. I prefer not to do any spoilers and that kind of stuff when I'm doing something like this. But there you go. I do have 2 negative things to say. And I do not consider what I do here a platform to shit on people's work. But when I see something, I'll say something if I feel it's necessary. And I will say this first one I'm going to talk about kinda isn't necessary, but it kind of made me put the book down for a second. Boom. Okay, so first off, I do read a lot. Tons. And when you read a lot, you find tropes that you're into, or some that's kind of like been there, done that. And depending upon your personal flavor, depends upon whether or not you're going to go along for the ride or you're going to get through it and whatever else. So they generally don't bug me much. Okay? But early on in this book, when it's kind of giving his background, I'm sorry, not his background, it's giving the people he has to go after. I read something there, and to me, I thought it was 100% unnecessary to liking the story or reading the book, but when I got to it, I just groaned. And one of the 4 people he has to go after, and they kind of name them, 1, 2, 3, 4, which you figure, I'm a gamer sometimes, or I was more in the past than I am presently. The 4th guy is going to be like your boss battle. And therefore, he's going to be the hardest one to do. He probably has a cool name and this, that, and the other. And his weapon is going to be something unique. And you have to worry about, getting around it. And even where you fight's going to be important too. But the final battle he goes into is against a guy named Captain August Lamb. Okay? No problem. Loving it. Sounds pretty good. However, in the very next sentence, he calls him the Knight Rider. And I saw that, and I was like, and I put the book down, and I was like, are you freaking kidding me? That is just tropey as hell. And in 2020, when the book came out, to throw that kind of a moniker out there, you might as well use Ghost Rider or Phantom Rider. And it just was, and it's a petty thing, I understand. But in the following sentences, they actually talk about it's like, he got that name because he was in a prison, and he'd be able to walk in and walk out whenever he could. And by the way, no one ever asked him what kind of meat he was eating that he brought back, and yada yada. So it just was what it was, okay? All right, I got that off my chest. All right. Now, let me backpedal for a second, and I said it earlier before. Don't get me wrong. The dude wrote a book, and he got published. 10,000% kudos for that, and full respect. And actually, more not only respect, I got envy, because that's something I would like to do one day. And he's already done it. So he gets to have, his own little notch on his bedpost, and he can move ahead. Okay? I know it's petty, and most petty things are just people's opinions and problems, A lot of people who have this problem, like me, is like, well, that's not the way I would have done it. So, I will say, wholeheartedly, the fact that I read that, it's not his problem. It's not Wile E. Young's problem. And it's not the publisher's problem, nor is it the imprint's problem. It was just a thing, and I was like, OMFG. Secondly, completely unrelated to the first thing, was I can appreciate a short book. In fact, I read a lot of short stories. I'm in the middle of one now. It's back there. It's kind of like Victorian ghost stories. And I think I have a few videos on this series of short stories. So, loving them. Like I said, this is 200 pages. It's the kind of thing would almost be like beach reading or something while you're in the airport lounge. But it's something you can just go through it. And brand new, the cover price of these is $17.99. Okay. And inside, the font appears just a little bit larger. So when I put all this together, now, I'm pretty sure this is an independent publisher. So they're going to have a price point, and the price point has to make sense to them. Obviously, if they make something and they sell it for less than they made it for, why even print anything? You'll either go out of business or what have you. And they also say that we're kind of still in the middle of like an inflationary period, and this came out like during COVID. And for the ones I get, this is print medium, which some people think is just a dead business anyway. I don't, and I don't ever want to see it die. I also understand that I'm 50, and 50 kind of gives you those things where you say, oh, I remember back in my time, for soft cover pricing. So I might not have come up with the times to see it is. But with that many pages and that few words per page at that price point, for me, it was like a pill to swallow. In hindsight, I really wish I knew what I knew about these more when I was on eBay for that lot, because I totally would have paid a little bit more to get them all at one time at a higher price. But like I said, it's life. Get over it. It didn't happen. And, I think I have. I really do. So, even with the price point, I don't think it's going to stop me from picking up more. But instead of buying them all at once, I'll be getting them one by one by one by one over time, spread them out. Okay? So, that's it. This wasn't a very long one today. I hope I've been able to introduce you to this genre and at least take a look at it. Check out some of the titles that are out there. They're by different authors. I'm sure you can find, besides on their website, but on Amazon or even on a Goodreads or something like that. Barnes & Noble might have something. Just people talking about it. And if it gets under your skin enough to say, I got to check this out, at least one, go for it. Okay? A lot of the people that talk about the books that are published, I think as of right now, there's like 14 or 15. A lot of people do seem to talk about one called Dust. I think it was the third one that was released. And almost like, it's very interesting. Pretty soon, I'm almost finished with the second book, and I'm going to be coming back here and telling you about it. But there's something that happens in there which almost like has a character from another book kind of like walking through. So if you've ever seen like the movie 300, or maybe read the comic books, I'm going to assume the comic books follow the movie in some fashion. You might have a lot of people in one city, and some scenes you might have a character in it who has nothing to do with the scene per se. They're just there. So you can almost say, oh wait, this must have been when they were leaving this and going to that, and they stopped in this bar for a drink. So from what I saw in the second book, something like that might occur, which kind of like, it doesn't lead into the third book. It's just a nice little Easter egg that doesn't hurt the reading, and it doesn't be like, oh, wait a minute, I can't read the third one until I read the second one. No. I think they're completely independent so far. Okay? I will probably do another one of these in like minutes, so stick around. Otherwise, keep on reading. I hope this was helpful, and if it wasn't, let me know why it wasn't helpful a little bit, and I might be able to tweak my attitude if necessary. Okay? In the meantime, you take care. Bye-bye.